Bismillah, alhamdulillah, salatu wassalamu ala rasulillah. Assalamu alaikum. Peace be upon all of you. Inshallah, everyone's doing well. Looks like the live is going on YouTube despite the lag, so we'll get started here. Hope everyone is doing well. Welcome to Parenting Skills Muslims Need, Part 7. Today we will be looking at setting kids up to do tasks independently around the home, but within that, excuse me, it relates to understanding some things about how kids learn generally, which when you understand these things, you can start applying them to many different areas of how you interact with your child, as well as what your child does in their life to help them be successful, help them build confidence and competence. Two things that go together. So, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Please put the salam in the chat. If you're watching live, jazakumullahu khairan. To everyone who is here live, if you're please put the salam in the comments and feel free to share where you're watching from. And also feel free to throw questions in the chats or the comments. And inshallah, time permitting at the end, I will get to them, or I will collect them and get to them some other time, because I'm more than happy to do that interaction with you all. Assalamu alaikum. Okay, jazakallahu khairan to everyone who is here. Thank you. Walaikum assalam wa barakatuhu. Also like, share, subscribe, all that good stuff. Follow me on Instagram, Abraham_education, all those types of things. And please share the content with other people, because that is the only way that it spreads. Alhamdulillah, it is spreading a little bit. All right, let's get started. We're going to watch a video from 8 years ago, back in my days as a 4th grade teacher. This was when I was teaching at a charter school that was all Mexican kids. Had a wonderful experience. I was still a young teacher at the time working at the school. It was after I had taught in Saudi for 3 years. Taught 4th grade in Saudi for 2 years and then 3 years here in the United States. I have a lot of experience with that age, 4th grade, 9 and 10. Of course, I've moved on to high school since then. But what we're going to start here is by watching a couple videos from fall 2014. It's from the beginning of the class, the beginning of the school year, where what you do at that time of year, what you have to do in elementary school, really you have to do it with any ages. But the younger the kids are, the more thoroughly you have to do this. You have to teach them how to conduct the routines of the classroom, the cleaning up, the organization, all this type of thing. You have to really teach and train them at the beginning of the year to do that stuff competently. And if you don't, your school year is just going to be a mess. And any teacher who survives in teaching, they learn how to do this. So let's watch the video, and inshallah, we'll go from there to learn some things we need to learn to understand this. So this is the kids. They were doing math. And when they do math, they have all kinds of small groups. So that's why they're kind of scattered all throughout the classroom. The lady there is my former co-teacher. So I was the ESL teacher in this classroom, and she was the mainstream teacher. So this is the kids transitioning from math time to reading time. And they're getting their things ready. So you see them all quiet, moving around the room, carrying the stuff, getting things put away. So one girl's got her hands up with her fingers crossed. That's a nonverbal signal to show she has to go to the bathroom. So that way, she doesn't have to use her voice and say, I need to go to the bathroom, and be interruptive. Something you teach them. Okay, look at these good kids. Quietly moving around. Some of them sitting at their desks waiting patiently. Okay, I'm recording it on an old iPhone. Sorry, it's blurry because it's an iPhone from 8 years ago. Look at them sitting at the desk respectfully. One young lady waiting for the binders to come in. She's going to organize those. Getting the papers in folders. So this is like 23 or 24 kids here. How are they doing all this stuff so competently all at one time without causing a jamboree? This is like nothing short of a miracle, what you're seeing here, brother. Okay, it's not a miracle, but it's... Not everyone can make something like this happen. I'm just letting you know. Look at him sitting quietly. Patiently get out the binder, the success binders. That's for reading. Oh, they know where to go. People know their tasks.
We know how to do this without speaking.
Know how to do it.
Use hand signals.
Quiet reminder from the teacher. Some of them start talking. Can't let any of that talking happen. Doesn't make for a smooth transition with that. Oh, it's a thing of beauty. Absolutely beautiful. I miss these kids.
Justin, go take a break out in the hall.
Okay, now the one kid out in the corner there who I'm asking to go in the hall just to comment, because I know some of you are going to say, hey, you said in a previous video not to kick kids out of the classroom. I'm not kicking that kid out of the classroom. That is a kid who's high functioning, but he was severely autistic. And he had an alternative education plan. And a part of that was a big issue he had was control himself physically. He's also a very strong kid. And he also watched way too many music videos. So all the time in class, he'd just like start dancing and things and aside. And we had a system worked out with him where when he would do that and couldn't control himself, we'd just send him out of the room and he'd get his, jitters out there. So that's not kicking that kid out of the class, just so you know. Just have to side comment based on what I said before. That's part of a planned system going on in there. Okay. Look at these quiet kids waiting for things to start. Oh, binders getting distributed at the tables. Responding to the signal. I miss these kids. These kids are seniors in high school now.
Hey, that time was only 8 seconds to get your attention. You got your ball out under 10 seconds. Fifth to 5. How well do you think the class did at cleaning up from that? Okay, Alex E, I saw 4. Why a 4?
Because 2 or 3 people will help.
Okay, great. Anyone agree or disagree with Alex? Roy? So there were only a couple people talking, so it wasn't a quite perfect 5, but we were pretty close. Anyone else agree or disagree with the score of 4? Or Zerelli?
I kind of agree too because I've been some people whispering and talking.
Okay, but for the most part, we did pretty good, didn't we?
Okay, a few things here just to point out. It's so fun breaking down video. There's really a lot to get out of it. So you see, there's a whole process take place. Obviously, the kids were not just told, okay, put your math stuff away, get the reading stuff out in order to be able to do this. Okay, I uploaded this video on September 30th, 2014. So we were in school. This was like 3 weeks maybe in school. And sometimes in elementary school, you'll spend the first 3 weeks like just working on this stuff. So this is like the culmination of a whole lot of buildup and work to get them good at this. And my co-teacher there, what you see her asking, there's some things that actually take out of the interaction there. Number one, the kids are able to like self-reflect and give feedback. That is another thing that's already been trained into them from this. And she's asking questions. I talked about questions in session 5, and I have more to say on that. I might show some things today or also do an additional video to continue talking about that. But I talked about when you ask kids questions, when you initially do it, you have to engage it in a way where it's easy for them to respond. So we have this system where, how do we do 1 through 5? Just raise your hand, show with your hands, and get broad feedback from everyone. And it's a low risk way for kids to participate because they don't have to focus on articulating themselves verbally. Then some kids who, based on the way they raise their hands, have that confidence or whatever, she asks for them to explain their score or ranking and this type of thing. And you hear kids say, well, a few kids were talking, that's not something that kid just constructed out there. That was like a really clear set criteria of how we're supposed to do this that they already know. And, we practiced this time. We worked on every little bit of what this transition takes. And when the kids would mess up before, you have them start over and do it again and start over and do it again. So they get really used to that. And I just say that because when you see videos of kids doing stuff successfully, people sometimes have a tendency to assume like, well, those kids can do that, but these kids can't, or well, those kids must have it at home. These don't, these kids come from a mix, they're all the same cultural heritage, but they come from a mix of different homes. Okay. And parents, when you have parents come into your classroom and they see kids doing this, you get parents who say, wow, can you come to my home and get them to do this at home and all that type of thing? So it's like, how do you do it? How do you do it? And this reflective questioning part, with questioning, don't expect kids to answer questions with something that you haven't already put in or you don't know is already there. It is just a point I wanted to make with that. But but we're going to get into today is how do you build kids up? What do you need to know in order to be able to build kids up to get to do something like this very competently? I'm going to watch one more video. It's shorter, but this is okay. They've transitioned from math. They put the math stuff away. They're at the tables now. The next thing that they had to do and that we worked on is getting out the stuff for literacy, getting out the stuff for reading. Every elementary school, you're going to have math time and reading time these days, at the very least. You can use that information to ask kids about their day at school as well. So here is them putting the reading stuff away.
Finished up with reading. Okay, it is time to put your reading materials away.
Actually, I'm sorry, we're practicing putting stuff away for reading here. Okay, look at that. Look at the cooperation. Oh, the quietness. One thing at a time. Putting things in piles. MashaAllah. Absolutely beautiful. And these are talkative kids not saying a word. Look at those little angels. MashaAllah. Those desks are cleared. Just like that. 45 seconds. 24 kids, 45 seconds. Tables cleared, organized, everything put away. SubhanAllah. How can that happen? How is that even possible with these little runts, these little rugrats, these annoying kids that we have in our lives? How do we get them to do something like that? Well, we've seen from the video here, it is possible, brothers and sisters. We just have to know how kids learn. We have to know how kids learn and what it takes to build them up. And it takes time in the beginning, but building them up first pays so many dividends, because then you get kids to a point where they can do tasks like this independently, and it saves you all kinds of time down the road. And obviously, this is a classroom setting, but the principles of accomplishing something like this and the process into doing it, you can easily transfer it to home, and you want it to transfer it to home, and you want kids to have tasks and chores around the home, because that is a big way that they will learn in life, and it's a big way that they will build confidence and competence, and they need that for success outside of home, especially if they go to school. When kids come to school, as a teacher, you can tell the kids who have responsibilities at home and those who don't. And our kids need that. All right. Presentation here about this is I'm gonna go take you guys through parts of a presentation that I've given a lot in teacher professional development that teaches some basics about how kids learn, and especially to illustrate pitfalls that people fall into when they're trying to teach kids things. Now, you see the title of the presentation, Cognitive Architecture and Its Implications for Instruction. So cognitive means having to do with the mind. Architecture means the way it is formed. Now, basically, to keep things really simple, this is from psychological theory. Now, any type of theory that comes from Western academia or that type of stuff, my default position is to be skeptical of it out front. You cannot just take it in and assume it is correct. There really is so much junk that is taught in Western academics, especially in the social sciences. So you have to be very skeptical of it. I posted a video on Tuesday that was an interview that I did with Sajid Lippam, where I talk about progressive education methods and how they have ruined education, and they've saturated the world of education, and they've touched on the world of parenting theory as well. And they've especially saturated the world of education in the United States. But then a lot of developing countries nowadays, because of their inferiority complex, where they just assume the United States is doing everything well, they are trying to adopt these things as well, thinking that they're good teaching methods when they are not. and progressive education theory is at bottom based on the idea that the only genuine learning is when children construct their own learning or when they form it themselves. That is a complete load of garbage. It's a complete load of garbage. Kids need to be taught things directly, and kids only reproduce something after it has been shown to them before. And this model of understanding the human mind gets to that. It's called the Atkinson and Shiffrin model of memory. Atkinson and Shiffrin, they were like some psychologists from the 1960s or something. And this theory that they had is a theory at the time, but it has been tested in different ways, both with lab experiments as well as some things nowadays concerning neuroscience that attest to its validity very, very well. And as a teacher, I'll tell you, it's good to know to have this in this frame of understanding as your own frame of understanding when you're teaching kids. Now, basically, in your mind, you have long-term memory and you have short-term memory. Long-term memory is what they call the centrally dominant feature of cognition. Why? Because it's where you hold things. It's where you hold things. Your short-term memory is also sometimes called your working memory. And your short-term memory is used for two things. It is one, used to transfer things. Well, I say it's two things. It's used for one thing primarily, actually. Okay, I'm sorry. It's used for two things. One, your short-term memory is what you are actively working with whenever you're working on a task. Whatever you're actively working with, you're working within your short-term memory there. Working on things, practicing things, or rehearsing things, as they would call it, in your short-term memory a lot transfers things into your long-term memory. And then the more things that you transfer into your long-term memory, the more things that you have to retrieve from your short-term memory. Now, children before puberty are gathering things into their long-term memory. Young children are very, very, very absorbent. Then when you get into adolescence, you start the process of what psychologists call pruning, which is where your mind gets more decisive of what to hold on to and what to get rid of. And as you get older beyond adolescence, your mind has gotten really sharp and selective about what it chooses to hold on to and what it chooses to get rid of. And it will only choose to be selective of the things to hold on to that your mind deems to be really, really important. And this is why older people struggle with their memory, because their memory literally holds on to less things, but what it does hold on to is the more important things. Now, when kids are learning, the traps that people fall into when kids are learning is they overwhelm a kid's short-term memory. They overwhelm the short-term memory by giving them too many things to integrate based on what they already have in their long-term memory. This is the big mistake that people always make with teaching and instructing kids to do things. And when kids do that, when kids' short-term memory is overwhelmed, they experience what psychologists call cognitive overload, which causes a lot of frustration. It will cause them to feel annoyed. It will cause them to impulsively want to resist or withdraw from or get out of whatever situation you're in. Most behavior problems in school come from teachers causing cognitive overload in kids and not properly being able to engage them in the academics. That's part of why progressive theory of education has trashed education so badly and has created and has compounded what they call the achievement gap in America so badly. If you look at the bottom bar, two things that you really need to remember about how that you need to know in your mind when teaching kids. Two main things I want to take out of this. You need to get in your mind how to break things down into the smallest increments possible. And you also need to understand that success in performing tasks creates motivation in young people and in all people. There's been studies done in the professional world that have shown that people are more motivated to do tasks that they feel a sense of success with than they are motivated to do tasks where they're going to get more money if they do it. Bigger motivator than money. So this idea of cognitive overload and not overloading a kid's short-term memory is extremely important in getting them to be successful at what they're doing. Now, some studies that have done I'm sorry, when the slides upload, it doesn't allow for these transitions that I put in. So I know the page looks a little busy right now. But part of the ways that this theory of understanding the mind was first lab tested was an experiment that psychologists did where they took people and they showed them arrangements on a chessboard for 30 seconds. Then they took the chessboard away for 30 seconds. And then they asked those people to reproduce the arrangement that they had looked at from memory. So 30 seconds to put it in your short-term memory, 30 seconds where it's away from you looking at it, and then you get it back and you have to put it in. Now, they did this with two types of people. One, people who were novices, which you see in blue there, in chess, meaning they hadn't played chess much. Number two, people who were experts in chess. So they had played, they're experienced in chess. Then with the chessboard arrangements, they were done in two types. One, chessboard arrangements that were just completely random, just putting pieces in random spots. And then number two, arrangements that were actually produced from playing a real game of chess. Now, what these studies found was that the only situation where someone could reproduce the chessboard that they had looked at for 30 seconds after being away from it for 30 seconds was experts who were reproducing the chessboard arrangements from actual games. Why? Because in their long-term memory, they have a lot of background to draw on from that. Whereas the novice does not have that same background. And then if you have a chessboard arrangement that's not produced from a real game, it's just something random, well, then you've messed with the background in the long-term memory that the expert actually has. So they're not even able to do that. So being able to perform tasks competently is reliant on what exists in your long-term memory, and especially what is hardwired into your long-term memory. And how do you hardwire things into your long-term memory? It's through a lot of practice, rehearsal, repetition, if you will, with short-term memory, a lot of work in long-term memory. So that type of build-up needs to take place. Some general, and by the way, the study with chess boards, that was done in like the 60s, or I'm sorry, 1973. Well, no, sorry. It was done through the 40s, 60s, 70s. But the same, conceptually, the same thing has been reproduced in a lot of areas, like what you see at the bottom. Symbiotic drawing, algebra, software design, networks. Okay, I have the research backing for this is solid. Okay, I promise you that. I don't tell people stuff from research unless I know it's solid. In blue and bottom, you see the big thing to take away from this. Large stores of information and skills in long-term memory equals capability. That is what makes someone competent in something. When they have enough things hardwired in long-term memory that they will not get overwhelmed in their short-term memory. Okay. What are some things to follow as far as principles of short-term memory? Again, up here you see it says working memory. That means short-term memory. The duration that someone can hold something that they are told or taught the first time in short-term memory is 30 seconds. Okay, this is where you get the in one ear, out the other ear phenomenon with kids. When you tell them something, especially tell them something for the first time, don't expect them to hold on to it for 30 seconds. And that's if they understand it well. So repeating things to kids throughout their life is something you're going to have to do. The amount of what they call elements, which, it's somewhat of a nebulous term, but it might mean like pieces of information or small tasks that you need to perform, things that are involved in whatever task you're asking someone to perform. The maximum, generally the amount of elements that someone can hold in their short-term memory at one time is less than 7, they say. Then some psychologists, they say less than 4. Bismillah. But the amount of things that can be held in your long-term memory, that have the potential to be drawn out of your short-term memory, there's no ascertainable limit on that. So the capacity of the long-term memory is very, very large. But again, when the short-term memory gets overloaded with too many elements to integrate, and especially for too long, it begs for what we call cognitive overload. And cognitive overload, you might call it being overwhelmed. It equals frustration, which equals resistance and trying to withdraw and get out of the work, get out of the situation. How much resistance do we get from our kids. And when I do my teacher training, I ask, what does a student or kids do when they experience cognitive overload? They distract themselves. They try to go out to the bathroom. They say this is hard. They overly ask for help. They go to sleep a lot if they're in high school. All this type of stuff. And when kids experience that cognitive overload a lot in school, it's what produces a phenomenon they call learned helplessness in school, where you get the kids who raise their hands way too much for every little thing, and they'll go, "Oh, I don't get it," that type of thing. That's called learned helplessness, where kids, they get helped too much is one part of it. But a whole other part of it is they're not set up for success in the first place with what they're doing, because they get put into tasks independently too quickly before they've been properly set up for competence and success in whatever task they're doing. I'm going to see some comments coming in. I'm just going to check them. Okay, brother. Okay, Jazakallah here. I assume, okay, the brother says it's absolutely garbage, totally opposite of the sunnah. I'm sure he's referring to progressive education. The brother says variables is better because in studies I've done and seen done in studies about 3 to 7. Yeah, elements, variables. I assume about some of the short-term memory here. It's small in numbers. The main thing you got to remember, 3 to 5 was most average. Like example, if I told you digits in an order, how many could you recall? That is the amount in order. It's about 3 to 7. Okay, Jazakumullah khairan, brother, for that contribution, and I appreciate your familiarity with this and reinforcing it here. And the point is, like short-term memory, it's small. Now, the big mistake that adults make is they can't get into what the short-term memory is actually like of children, because our minds are so much more advanced, especially when it comes to integrating different things. And that's part of what we're going to try to work on here. Okay. So let's see if this is going to be what's going to be useful here. Okay. I wish I could have the transitions on here so this would roll out the way I like it. But look, generally in short-term memory, okay, that's where they are performing the cognitive task. With any cognitive task, ignore the academic language part. That's kind of something specific to performing an academic task in a language that is your second language, which obviously I deal with a lot as an ESL teacher, being my specialty in school. But with any task a kid is performing or anyone is performing, there is at least the process of that task, and there is the knowledge necessary that needs to be integrated in that task. And what is generally found is if one of those things is not automatic to the person, meaning it's not ironed into their long-term memory so well that they can retrieve it automatically, either the process or the knowledge involved. If one of those things is not ironed into their long-term memory, they will more than likely suffer cognitive overload when doing the task. So this is a thing. When you are asking a kid to do a task, you have to really have a good understanding of what they already know to do and what's going to be automatic to them. And then when you're asking them to do this task, what are you trying to build up that's going to be put into their long-term memory? And as a parent, you are in a better position than anyone with your own kid to know what is going on in their minds with this. And it's a great lesson in how you should, a big takeaway from it is that you should work with kids' teachers a lot in school so they understand this, especially if your kid's teacher is culturally different, religiously different than your child, because that means your teacher, this is actually a whole problem that racially, culturally, and religiously diverse students have in school, where, if they don't come from the same background as their teacher doesn't know the background knowledge that child is likely to have that they can draw upon to build their understandings of in school. And in American schools, what becomes the common denominator amongst people in America is the entertainment industry. And you have teachers doing these lessons that are all drawing on like pop culture and this type of thing, because that's something the kids can at least recognize. If you want to take your child's teacher to the next level with stuff that they should understand about their kids, sorry, I didn't plan it, but shameless plug for engaging with some students in public schools. I mean, what I'm talking about here is a big reason why I put that program together in the book. And this is all lays into some of the thorough justification within the field of psychology and education that justify that training, that makes it a good training for people to appreciate. Okay, side thing. But just this is something to remember. process and knowledge. Whatever you're asking a kid to do, one of those two things has to be automatic in order for them to do it competently. When you have something that is like a process for them to do, you have to understand where in that process they are likely to get tripped up, because those are going to create frustration points for the kids. And a big thing that kids go to when being asked to do things around the house, do the laundry, do the dishes, clean up the room, whatever, laid out within that is frustration points, and the parents don't set the kids up to be able to deal with those things or to smooth that part out themselves when that comes along. So then the kid experiences the habit of, when mom and dad ask me to do something, I end up getting frustrated with it. So therefore I hate it and don't want to do it. And of course, there's the elements of they get taken away from fun and all that type of stuff. But that whole element of, they don't want to get taken away from fun. A big way that we mitigate that is making them experience success in doing these tasks around the house. So that way they develop a sense of competence and confidence with it, because that is what will produce motivation for them to do it more. Okay, so to get into the thinking about how you think about this. Tying a shoe. This is an old video that I have on my channel. Some of you may be seeing it, but I don't think most of you have, where I talk about tying a shoe and I go through how to think about it and with teaching a kid to do it. And what this is like an exercise to be taken through and thinking about how you need to break things down into the smallest increments possible. So the title of the video is Setting Kids Up for Success, because this breaking things down into as small increments as possible, thinking like a child in that sense, trying to get yourself into the experience of your child, is key to avoiding this cognitive overload phenomenon that ends up frustrating kids. So the video is pretty self-explanatory, so I'm mostly just going to let it play. Might pause it at some point and comment, because I need to do that. Peace be upon all of you. So setting kids up for success is really a way of thinking with all different types of things that you go about with them and that you carry with you. And it's something that you want to start practicing yourself. And it's something that it doesn't necessarily involve the same thing with each different area of raising a child. So it's really a way of thinking. And to illustrate it, I'm going to talk about it with like. Sorry, I got to interrupt because the brother, I'm appreciating this brother's participation. Okay, the brother says, I hope it starts with bunny loops, teaching kids how to tie a shoe. It does not start with bunny loops. That is way too big a thing. Okay, and I'm pausing to point that out because that seems like a good idea, but that's actually asking the kid to do too much as the first step. And inshallah, I'll get to this in the video. So thank you for saying that, brother. Success in terms of performing a concrete physical task, because it's a very concrete example, but the lessons you can take from it, you can extrapolate to many different things in parenting and to get the base and the foundation for, again, the proper way of thinking. So tying a kid tying their shoes. Now, if you look it up, a kid, information will tell you that a kid isn't able to tie their shoes until age 5, and that's generally true. There are like a lot of the fine motor skills that involves for tying shoes kids won't have until they're in age 5. But at the same time, a 5-year-old should be able to tie their shoes and can. And definitely. Okay, just one thing. Fine motor skills. That is a big area where frustration points exist when we ask kids to do things. Okay, so a task that they might be doing, it can involve, large gross motor skills, which is more things like you do with your whole body, and then fine motor skills, which are more things that involve the hands and maybe some intricacies with the fingers. You have to have a good sense of how that develops in a child throughout The ages, in preschool, they have kids do lots of playing and sensory things with like Play-Doh. Part of the reason for that is for those to develop properly. Having kids play outside and explore nature is a whole other thing to do that. Trying to get them to do crafts, all that type of thing is important. But this is something you need to think about when you're having kids do a task, especially the younger kids. Where are the fine motor skill points? Because a lot of times that's stuff that adults can do automatically, but it's still very much developing for kids, and they will experience a lot of frustration with it. Even making the bed, okay, you put the sheet over the bed. That uses your arms, but a lot of times it involves holding it within your fingers in an intricate kind of way that the kid might not be able to do. So you have to think about that and where the frustration point is going to come up. I'm going to illustrate where it comes up with tying the shoe. And this is why the bunny loop ears that doesn't work except at a certain age. But you already want the kid to know how to tie the shoes by the time they're at the age where the bunny loop thing is going to work. Come on now. Definitely a 6-year-old. And if you have a 6-year-old who you send to school in first grade and they can't tie their shoes, you're sending a kid to school who is likely who's going to be a drag on the class, to put it bluntly. You haven't set the kid up for success at school, because if they can't tie their shoes in there, the adult energy is going to have to be devoted to that kid, where it could be used somewhere else. And this is a bit of a problem we have in the Muslim community, especially with boys. We have kids a lot, and I know it's from talking to teachers across America, as well as looking at case studies and educational research. It's a problem with too many Muslim kids, especially boys, who are in school who don't have basic competencies for their age, and they're a drag on the whole class that way. And it's embarrassing to us, and it's embarrassing to them, and it causes insecurity in them. Our boys in the developed world, they're not going out into the fields to do work. They're not, or to do whatever at young ages anymore. So where they have the chance to learn responsibility is with these household tasks. That's why they need to do it. Okay. I'm not saying that to cater to the sisters. Okay. I want the girls to grow up with a sense of their domestic roles and all that other type of thing. I want that. But the boys need to do tasks around the home as well, so they can have this competency built up. All right. And that can have a dragging effect on the class overall. And you might be able to send them with shoes that don't wear laces for a lot of the time. But if they're going to gym class and this type of thing, they should be wearing shoes with laces. And some schools might even require it. So anyway, but tying shoes is just a concrete example. And it's, if you look up information about it, it's going to tell you that kids can't tie their shoes until they're 5. Now, parents will take from that and think from that, okay, I'm not going to make them tie their shoes until they're 5, or even work on tying their shoes until they're 5. Now, that's where the thinking is very mistaken. And the thinking isn't in terms of setting them up for success, both in the short term and long term. Shaw, you're hearing this, Brother Idris. Because you want them to be successful with it when they get to that age. And there's social implications for it. So when you think about setting kids up for success, just talk about performing tasks right now. And kids need to have tasks to perform, tasks of responsibility. Okay, there's too many kids who too much of their life is just having fun, eating, and going to school. Kids need tasks and chores to do as part of learning responsibility. And yes, both boys and girls. So, tying the shoes is one of the early ones that you can work on with them. Now, as an exercise, what something you can do is think through the process of tying your shoes and write down every single step, every single physical step that is involved in doing it. If I were doing a live class in person, what I would do here is, before showing what I'm going to show here, I would have you all go write down in the steps of tying a shoe. Okay, that's what I'd have you do. We got some idea of that because some of you would put as the bunny ear loops. But as I said, okay, all right. So that's the type of thing that you think, Conley. Oh yeah, okay, the bunny ear loop or whatever. But watch. Okay, that's you're thinking too advanced. And try to break down the physical steps in as small of increments as you possibly can. Because when you try to do that, That gets your mind closer to thinking about how kids experience things, and therefore how you need to communicate things and model things for kids to get them to be successful in tasks and to teach them. So just for example, if you ask an adult, what are the first two steps in tying your shoes? What they will say is the first step is you cross the laces, and the second step is you loop the string through. Or they will say the first step is to make bunny ear loops, which isn't even the first step because you got to do this part, brothers and sisters, before you get into any looping. We're not even getting into looping here. Okay, I'm serious, and I go through this with teachers. You have to get into a mind frame. If you really want to know how to teach kids effectively, you have to get into a mind frame where you think as incrementally as possible with things. Okay, learning anything always starts off slow. You have to go slow in order to go fast in learning. And when you build up the competence and confidence, you will get to a point, inshallah, where it starts to take off with kids. But this is where up front everyone is losing in teaching kids, both parents and the education system as well. And yes, progressive education theory is the culprit in a lot of this. Okay. Now, that's one way of communicating the first two steps.
Still not incremental enough, Idris.
Those aren't the first two steps. The first step for a kid is you take the lace and you put it in between this finger and that finger. And maybe it's a time where you teach the words index finger and thumb, because you might have to teach some terminology in order to teach the tasks. But that's the first step. You put it in between your fingers. And then you pull it up so it's straight. That's the second step. Then the third step is you put the other string in between your fingers. And the fourth step is you pull that up until it's straight.
Do you see what I'm saying here, brothers and sisters? Getting the string in between your two fingers, one step. Pulling it up like that, second step. One string at a time. Okay, the bunny loop involves getting it in your fingers, pulling it up, and then connecting it with using fine motor skills. You got three, four, maybe even 5 steps in that one bunny loop, brothers and sisters. This is what I'm trying to tell you. Okay, especially, and look, I am talking about starting with a kid who's like 2 or 3, because you can start at that age. You want to start at that age because they'll be doing it better by the time they're 5 as well. And just generally too, people don't like to say this, but teaching kids, it's better to think of them as much younger than they are when you're actually teaching them. One of the greatest gifts I had as a teacher was that I got to teach first grade my first year teaching, and I taught elementary school for 6 years before moving on to high school. Teaching kids in 10th and 11th grade is not too different from teaching kids in 4th grade. It's really not. And because I adopted a mindset that taught me how to teach kids at age 9 and 10, I'm able to do it so much better with kids who are 15 and 16. Because as an adult, your mind has gotten so far away from being a child that you are likely to overestimate the amount of integration that they can do, as well as their environmental awareness, because your mind is more advanced than theirs.
Okay, that's 4 steps right there.
4 steps right there. Allahu
Now,
Akbar.
a kid who's younger than 5, they can perform those steps. They can probably perform those steps as early as 2. So as early as 2, you can have them have a pair of shoes that they need to tie. And when it comes time to go out of the house and you're going to put those shoes on, you can start prompting them, showing them, and having them do those.
Okay, Allahu Akbar. I appreciate the chat. Bayan says, too many steps. I never learned like this. Look, this is another problem that adults have when they're trying to teach kids. You want to rush things up front. All right. One of the biggest issues I have in coaching teachers and talking to teachers is that they're afraid to slow down up front because the worry is, oh, well, if we go that slow in September, by December, we won't get through the unit or whatever the curriculum says. That is a load of hogwash. Why? Because what happens is, teachers, they go ahead with things before the kids have actually mastered step 1. And they just move them on to step 2, step 3, and then it's like you have to help them too much the whole way, and they never develop competence, or they're just going through the motions and they're not actually learning anything. And that's going on in schools so much.
So our kids are just getting shuffled through so many different things, both with our parenting, with our learning in the weekend schools, and their learning in school without really learning anything. Meanwhile, by the way, the entertainment industry and all that junk, they know what I'm talking about here. So they know how to actually create things that actually engage kids and actually get them to follow along with things. And that's how they trap their hearts and minds away from us, because we don't actually know how to do this. So this is not too many steps. This is the appropriate level of steps. It's what's going to build competence, and it's going to make sure so these initial steps, you don't have to re-go over them later. Allahu Akbar. First two steps. Oh, can you put it in between your fingers? Can you pull it up? Good. You know, can you do it with the other one? Very good. And then you can take over. Now once and just focus on those first few steps, and it won't be very hard. And have them do just that first step for enough time until it gets to a point where it comes time to put the shoes, and you're gonna help them tie the shoes, and they just start doing it almost automatically. Or they just need to you just need to say, can you get it started? That's the point.
And they can do it very easily.
You get
Once
them
they
to
can
do
that
it.
step easily, then go into teaching.
You get them to do the initial steps automatically. And then that step doesn't matter anymore. And that, brother, is when your method of doing the bunny loop right away, that's not simple. That is simpler when you can already do these smaller incremental pieces that are involved with the bunny loop. Getting it between two fingers, raising it up, and that connecting it to the bottom part of the string is very involved, because you first pinch the string with these two fingers, with the thumb and the index, and then when you loop it around, you have to execute with your middle finger in order to make the connection. A 2 or 3-year-old cannot do that. But it is mistaken to think that you can't try to get a 2 or 3-year-old to do part of the process, and you're just going to wait until they are 5 or 6 in order to do this. Because if you deny them the opportunity to master those smaller pieces before they're 5 or 6, then they could get overwhelmed in trying to do the bunny loop when they're 5, 6, and then they don't feel confident with it, and then they get reticent, and then you go, oh, can't you just do it, Mom? And then the kid's 5 or 6, and we don't want to wait 2 or 3 minutes for the kid to grapple through, or even 5, 6 minutes. We don't want to wait those minutes for the kid to grapple through tying their shoe when we have to get out to the store and we have to get to the masjid to pray, and we got so many things to do. So it just becomes easier for us to just do it for them. And then we are teaching them learned helplessness, and they're not getting competent and good at anything. And this is especially an issue with boys, because boys will develop fine motor skills at a slower pace than girls too, as well as abstract thinking, as well as verbal ability, all that stuff. In the next step. So the next step is going to be, again, it's not just crossing, but it's crossing with one hand over the other. Mm-hmm. One hand over the other and touching the index finger. That's the next step. Mm-hmm. So just putting it together like this. Okay, that's going to be the next step you're going to have them do. Once they've got this habit, then you can say good. And at this point, you can hold their hand kind of while they do it to get them started with it. But you start getting them doing it and showing it the right way. And again, this is a step that they can perform. Now, the step after that is pinching the two laces together. This part is intricate. This is where you start to get with the fine motor skills. This part is intricate, okay? You start to get with it. And this will be a frustration point for kids. Probably get them there at age 2 or 3. So look, this is the thing. That frustration point of where you're integrating the 3 fingers with the loop around or putting it through as you're talking here, brother, those types of things that involve the fine motor skills. All right, a 2 or 3-year-old is not going to be able to do that. 5, 6, maybe they can. But if the previous steps to that are not ironclad for the child and the long-term memory, then that is going to take a whole bunch of cognitive load just before leading up to that frustration point. So you want that frustration point when they're ready, when they're old enough to do it, to be like an isolated thing that they can practice just by itself, because all of these incremental steps leading up to it are easier. And principally, this is something that transfers to any form of learning. And people don't understand this. It is highly needed in our education system, especially with the cultural and religious and racial differences between teachers and students that's going on certainly in American schools these days. And the fact that this issue is not tended to causes kids to just be washed through the system without learning anything. And then when I get them in high school, I got to reteach them their whole elementary school and middle school education before I can even get into teaching them what I'm supposed to teach them in high school. But alhamdulillah, because I take this approach, I'm able to do it. Sister says, yeah, now I get how complicated it may be for a 2 or 3-year-old. Alhamdulillah for being a subscriber. Jazakallah khair. Share the
point where
content.
They can raise it up and put together. Now, again, the looping, it's more complicated, but you can show them but you can have them look at it. Really
See what's going on with the
closely
thumb
while you're
there?
doing
I mean, that is
it. You can
complicated.
describe what you're doing with your fingers to it as you do it,
That takes finesse.
and that sets them up mentally to when their fine motor skills do develop, to
That's
have a
exactly
clear
right,
idea
brother.
of what they need to do. You know, you can again also you can sometimes put their hand in your hand and sort of move their fingers along with yours and start to do it. You can do little things like that to start to set them up.
Okay, that's a thing you can do when they're younger. When you get to that fine motor skill part, like you put their hand in yours and you kind of give them a sense, make them feel of what you're doing with your hand. Okay, they might make them curious to even try doing it by themselves, and they could develop it sooner. Okay, kids can actually develop things sooner, like a little above their standard developmental level, with all kinds of things, not just fine motor skills, if they really try. But you need this incremental buildup. And our brother says, yes, 100%. Brother Idris, I love you for the sake of Allah. And all of you in the chat and watching live, I love all of you for the sake of Allah, everyone watching. Jazakumullahu khairan. The brother says, yes, 100%. This is why I said opposite of sunnah, because basics are key. They are. And brothers and sisters, there's something in Islamic learning. Islamic learning has a lot to offer people. If you want people to get an illustration of that, refer to a non-Muslim teacher, the book Engaging Muslim Students in Public Schools, because in chapter 5, your brother lays it out for them how Islamic learning actually has a lot of these principles that I'm talking about here that are the real things justified by educational research, even though they are not the things that are highly promoted. But we want people to see how Islam actually has that to offer to benefit them. Example A, learning to read and memorize the Quran, which most of us have done. You don't start just by reading Surah Al-Fatiha. You don't have Surah Al-Fatiha put in front of you and learn from there. This is how you read, Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. No, you start with Alif Ba Ta. You start with Fatha Dama Qasra. You learn each one of those in an isolated form before you even start putting them together. And then you have the books that teach Arabic phonetics, which, mashallah, the Islamic scholars of Lughat al-Arabiya, for centuries, they have put together in fine detail the incremental steps that need to be learned and practiced in that process to build it up so that you can go through one of those books and practice, learn each piece one by one and practice and integrate them to where by the end of it, you can decode Arabic phonetics. It's a beautiful process in incremental buildup. And it lays a foundation for understanding learning of anything in general, and it should be applied to other things. And even my impression, I'm not a student of knowledge, as I've told you all many times before, but my impression is even with the learning of aqidah and fiqh and this type of thing, it involved a lot of memorization and this type of stuff in the beginning. And the scholars would put together these smaller books that you would memorize to build a foundation upon, all that type of stuff, and to build up incrementally. That learning is valuable. That learning is proven by research. Watch my video with Sajid Lippam that I posted last Tuesday about how progressive education has corrupted education. I'm talking about the methods. I'm not talking about social issues. Progressive education is so highly pushed in the field of education because of the progressive left-wing disposition of people in academic institutions that it's completely corrupted learning, and people don't understand this stuff. Yes, Jazakallah khair, Brother Idris.
Now, maybe the looping part is something that you're going to be doing with them up until they're at about age 5. But once you do that step, once you do this step for them, you can have them grab the two sides. And what's the next step? They can do this part.
Okay.
They can do that.
See,
part.
now this is a big lesson here. All right. So if we are there along the process and we understand in the process where frustration points are likely to occur, we bring them along in the process, then we do the frustration points, then they can experience further along in the process. So here they can get the experience of tying the shoe down. All right. And this is all before they're 4 or 5. Excuse me. So, you want to develop a mindset where you can break things down in as incremental steps as possible. And you anticipate where those frustration points are. And I'm going to be digging deeper into this soon. So stay tuned. Inshallah, we might go for 90 minutes today.
3, 4, they can do that part. And then, the first part of the looping is you lift it up like this. So when you break down the parts of tying the shoe,
that the looping is broken down itself, brothers and
small
sisters.
increments as possible.
Okay.
And when you break each step down, you're categorizing them in your own mind between ones that are simple and ones that are complex.
Yes.
And ones that involve the more mature fine motor skills and ones that don't. The motor skills specifically with tying the shoes, but with any task, there's going to be steps that are simple and ones that are complex. So you're going to know in doing it along, you can prompt them to do the simple ones as you go along, and you're going to give more help with the complex ones. And in this way, like from age 2, 3, and 4, you're building the skill up already, and you're building the confidence up already. So then when their physical capacity and their mental capacity has developed to the point where they can perform the whole task when they're at age 5, they're set up better for success in doing it. Because, what happens too long. Now, another thing with this too, you have to give yourself time in doing this, because kids they refuse about tying their shoes at age 5, even when they're able to, because it's been done for them too much. Now, a key way this happens is when it comes time to go out of the house.
And I know I can't talk about this. We're just going to let it play.
Everybody ready?
Sorry for the repetition, but repetition is good for learning.
Kids. So, and parents just do this too often. It's simpler and more efficient time-wise for you to just do it for them.
You can't fall into that trap.
Because you want to get the shoes on and tied in 30 seconds and not...
Look, this is like a universal thing about life, brothers and sisters. Okay, patience and deliberance up front creates more time in the long run. Okay, a lack of patience up front. Okay, it's like the same thing I was showing you with the pausing and the kids interrupting and stuff and not reaching that breaking point. Okay, you have to be patient when you're really being challenged like that in order for it to work out in the long run.
3 minutes.
Certainly Islam teaches
but
this.
You have to allot that, but if, because your mind is in a rush when you're moving around. But that 2.5 minutes difference, in the grand scheme of things, it's not that much time. And it's actually time that is worth the investment there for the independence that it's going to build in the kid later.
Bingo. It's an investment.
So, from when they're young, you want to spend more time having them do these simple tasks, even when they're 2, 3, 4, even though it will take the process longer to tie the shoes. But the more they do it, the more it becomes habitual for them. So it all gets quicker. And then even when they have to do the more difficult parts, once they're 5, you have to give yourself the few extra minutes it takes for them to do it and not feel rushed when you're moving out the door. Because that's totally a, short-term gain from the parent. You're gaining 2 minutes of time and doing it for them, but you pay for it in the long run because you don't build up independence in the kid. So just try.
Okay, brothers and sisters. This book, Yardsticks by Chip Wood, kind of a funny name, Yardsticks, and the guy's name is Chip Wood. It's a really good book. I've talked about it before on my channel. It's definitely worth getting. One thing, it goes through developmental indicators from age 4 to 14, and it will have like these bullet pointed pages. And you see here, they go over indicators with motor ability and cognitive growth and this type of stuff. It can be very good for giving you a baseline of what to expect with kids at different ages. Those things are a continuum. It's not like 100%. Don't get it and think like, oh, if, it says a 9-year-old should do this, my 9-year-old, don't like freak out like that. Because, there's gray areas with it a little bit, but it shows a general continuum. And again, it's good for just getting the mindset in thinking about this different type of integration. The fine motor skills are a big thing with the frustration points. The other one is, that's the micro level thing. The other thing is the overall organization of the task. That is a huge thing that the adult mind does so much more automatically than the child mind. and where the kids will experience frustration with what you're asking them to do if it is not tended to. Now, I'm going to go through an example. But this is the big thing, number one, to get out of this. Okay. Break things down into the smallest increments possible. Now, with tasks, this kind of going along with them, training them with each step, nurturing each step, practicing each step is a big part of building up kids' confidence. That takes an investment in time up front, both over their life and within the moment of whatever task you're doing and trying to build up. That type of individual practice with each step. The other big thing that can really benefit you to get them doing it independently is tending to the steps of the task visually and giving them a visual guide to doing the task. And that is the thing I'm going to get into right now. By the way, another thing you should take from this, by age 2, once your kid is walking and can pick things up with their hands, try to do as many chores around the house with them as possible. When it comes time to pick the things up or whatever around the house, involve them with it. And think this way: what are the simple things? What are the complex things? And you can have them do the simple things. Okay, they got a bunch of toys out. You have the bin for the toys. You pick it up off the floor, but you hand it to them and they throw it in the bin or whatever. That type of thing. How you break it down. And when they're very, very little, they will love doing that stuff, especially if it's a chance to share time with you, especially if it's a time for you to give them positive reinforcement with that. You won't get that pushback then, and it'll be conditioning them from a young age to conquer some elements of these tasks, to get good at it, and then also just to develop it as part of their mental habits that these types of tasks around the house are things that they do. Now, getting them to be independent, a huge tool that you can use are what is called visual. All right, bismillah. Inshallah, you can hear me. Okay. Another big thing you can do is use something called visual instruction plans. I'm just going to write it out here for the sake of emphasis. Sometimes they're called VIPs for short. Visual instruction plans. There's another thing from Fred Jones, Tools for Teaching. And I'm going to show you the example, the standard example that you would see in education of how this works. And it's such a big thing, especially when the task is very concrete and you already have this mindset of thinking of breaking things down as little increments as possible to getting kids to do things independently. So let's look at the example. All right, if people can relate to this. All right, when you learned long division, go back to 4th grade, maybe 3rd grade. Some of you who are a little younger, they might try to push it then. 3rd, 4th grade, you're learning long division. Everyone did this. Okay, the teacher started with the problem up in the corner there, and they, 434 divided by 7, they took you through the problem, and then you're left with something that looks like this on the board, and then the teacher gives you some long division problems and says, okay, do the problems. If you need help, go look at the example on the board. Now, if you look at this example of a long division problem, brothers and sisters, let me ask you something about this example. Where is step 5? What is step 5? What's step 5? What is step 5? Put it in the chat. What is step 5 in this long division problem? What's step 5? What is it? Come on, brothers and sisters. Give me something in the chat. Give me something. What's step 5? What is step 5 here? I got silence. I got nothing. Nothing in the chat. Is it taking you this long to figure out what step 5 is? Really, brothers and sisters? It's taking you this long? Well, of course it's taking you this long. And it says, I don't know. I forgot. 0, I don't even know what that means, Hans. So, all right, you don't know where step 5 is because this visual is a bunch of garbage itself also. Now, look, what just happened there too. This happens a lot when we ask kids questions in instructional settings and parental settings. One, when we haven't tended to actually thinking about what is really in their long-term memory that they can actually retrieve automatically. We'll ask kids questions and the kids will like stiffen up and, oh, I don't know. And then we'll get all like kind of oh, well, you know, like, and then we have to give them the answer, and then the kid has to feel bad because they didn't know it or whatever. That's just one thing. So that asking that question illustrates that. If you ask a kid a question, you know, there's different purposes to ask questions for. Inshallah, we'll talk more about it. Inshallah. But, you know, a lot of the times you want to know the kid is going to be able to answer, you know, depending on the purpose. This asking kids questions, which, you know, a lot of times are what you call fishing questions, just to see if they know something and they don't. That causes learner anxiety in kids, makes them feel less confident for no good reason. But, you know, getting to the visual aspect of this, okay, the visual aspect, you know, so many people had a learning experience where they learned long division, taught the process, and this is the visual thing they were left with, but it doesn't help you know where to go in the process. Okay, so the better visual looks more like this. And again, if I had the animations, I can't do the animations on StreamYard with the presentation, but if I had them, it would lay out, you know, I would present it. So you see step 1 and you practice step 1. Then you draw out step 2 and you re-go over step 1 and 2. Then you draw out step 3 and you re-go over step 1, 2, and 3. Then you draw out step 4 and you re-go over step 1, 2, 3, 4. And then you draw out step 5 and you re-go over 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, this type of thing. All right. But you see how the difference between this visual, in this visual, you can see the difference of what takes place from one step to another. In this one, you just see the finished product. But in this one, you see the roadmap. You see the actual path there and the difference from one step to another, what actually changes. This is the type of thing that will really help if you really want to get kids doing things independently, because we can take them through the steps and practice the steps of these different tasks. But then we want to get to them to a point where we can leave them to do it independently and they can practice doing the whole thing independently until they don't need this visual help and it becomes automatic for them, because this is how you build competence. So when we leave them and we set them off to do something independently, giving them a visual that shows the roadmap of where they're going, that clearly illustrates the difference from one step to another, is the key. Let's look at a household example, shall we? Who wants to look at our household example? Raise your hand or put me or something in the chat if you want to look at an example of a visual instruction plan that we can make for a household chore. Inshallah, let's talk about not putting the dishes away. Not putting the dishes away. Thank you, sister. Okay, again, breaking things down into steps. We all want the kids to do the laundry. We all want the kids to do the dishes. We all want the kids to take the garbage out. We all want the kids to clean up their toy mess after themselves and all that good stuff. All right? Now, with this, you want to pick some things with your kids that are basic household routines, like I showed you in the video, cleaning up after math, getting the things out for literacy class. That is basic everyday stuff to the classroom. There are things we need done, basic everyday things to the functioning of the household. You want to pick some of those things. You want to break it down in incremental steps as possible. You want to do it with kids, invite them to do it with you, and especially if they are little, they will like that. Go through the steps with them. And then you want to create a visual for them that takes them through it step by step when you start having them do it independently. But again, Bismillah. We want to break things down as incremental as possible. Both the overall organization of the task and then as well each piece within that organization. So we can talk about doing the dishes, putting the dishes away. But there's many different pieces to that. There's putting the plates away. There's putting the cups away. There's putting the pots and pans away. There's putting the silverware away. Whew, that gets complicated. Each one of these things is something separate. And again, if we're breaking it down as incremental as possible, we want to do it one by one. Now, look, some of you will find with some kids, they're able to get into the stuff quicker. And alhamdulillah, if you do that, you don't need to do as much breakdown for each step or whatever. But some of our kids will only experience success with this much breakdown. And young boys are more likely to need this breakdown than girls, and it's key to setting them up for success. And even with the kids who will get it fast, there is no harm in breaking it down like this. When we don't break things down, we have the harm of only engaging the kids who are already advanced learners and already have a solid bank of background knowledge. That's what happens in so many classrooms. You see novice teachers all the time. They only know how to talk to the kids in a way where they're reliant on the 2, 3, quote unquote, smart kids in the class to answer all the questions, because they don't know how to break things down to give the other kids a chance to engage in the classroom. I see a lot of that going on in the weekend schools when I watch, when there's a lecture or something going on and people feel this pressure to ask kids questions. They don't know how to ask questions that are going to get everyone involved and move everyone along, and they're just dependent on the 2 or 3 kids whose parents are already teaching them what they need to know. And the message the other kids are getting is, they get anxiety from not being able to participate, this type of thing. But anyway, let's look at a visual instruction plan just for putting the plates away. All right. So, okay, welcome to my kitchen. First thing, opening the dishwasher. Observe what we have going on here, brothers and sisters. Okay, my hand is on the handle, but there's a fine motor thing here going on of clicking that little button and then pulling, and I've illustrated the click, and you see it step by step. Step 2. Clear the counter. Yeah, that counter is never clean when you're doing the dishes because there's a whole lot of dishes built up, and I did not clean my kitchen before taking these pictures. I actually put this all together very quickly because it doesn't take long to put these things together. But the key to building the process here is you just go through it yourself. You think, what is every little itty bitty physical thing I'm doing? And you take a picture while you're doing it to show the difference of one thing transitioning to another. And the beautiful thing about today is we can take pictures of this so easily. It used to be teachers, they would have to draw this stuff out and type of thing as best they can. But we see here, okay, clearing the counter space. Why are we clearing the counter space? It's so that we have room to take plates out of the cupboard and then put those plates in 3 separate piles, as you see. Largest to smallest on the counter. These are the dishes that are already in the cupboards. Now, why am I showing it that way? Because when I was doing this and thinking it through of how this would work for a small kid, this is not the way I would put the dishes together. Because if I put the dishes together, I can grab the dishes in one hand and then from the dishwasher and then the ones from the cupboard in another, and just hold them and put the pile together myself with my big hands in the cupboard without having to take the plates that are in the cupboard out already. But a smaller kid with smaller hands, they might need a different organizational method in doing that, because he or she is not going to be able to take that pile of dishes and just, easily spread them out and put different piles together like that. It has to be a little more drawn out, deliberate process that uses more space because their smaller hands need that. So when you are going through this process yourself, you have to think about that type of breakdown. So I have the dishes laid out on the counter. That's step 3. You have the plates on the counter. Now, what are we going to do? Well, of course, now we are going to get the plates one by one from the dishwasher by size and put them in those piles. You see the breakdown. So first we identify the small plates. We grab this. I'll put, inshallah, you guys can see the mouse. I'm not sure if you can. Okay, you grab the small plates, identify the small plates, grab the small plates. You put the small plates in the pile. Notice how visually, within those visuals with the 2 bottom pictures, I can see the pile going from me putting it in to complete. Yes, the counter is dirty because that's how the counter normally looks. Let's just be honest. Okay, identify the medium plates next. Okay, I'm not putting anything in the cupboard yet. Next, I'm identifying the medium plates, taking the plates out, putting the medium plates into the pile. The pile is complete. Next step, what's next? We know what's next, the large plates. Okay, the large plates get into the pile. I take the large plates out. Okay, might take more than one step. And then I have the piles completed now. And then we're going to go through the piles one by one and put them in the cupboard. Large pile in first, followed by the medium plates, followed by the small plates. And I can see visually what this looks like when we are done. And this is success, getting the plates in. And I've broken down just one part of doing the dishes, doing the plates. And then I can do it with the cups until, well, once they've mastered the plates, then I can have them do the cups. Once they've mastered the cups, then I can have them do the plates and the cups. Once they've mastered doing the plates and the cups, then I can have them do the pots and pans. Once they've mastered the pots and pans, then I can have them do the plates, cups, and the pots and pans. Once they've mastered doing the plates, cups, and pots and pans, then I can have them do the silverware, and I can have them work on the silver, and I can have them work on the spoons. Then I can have them work on the forks. Then I can have them work on the knives. And then once they've mastered the forks and the spoons, and then I can have them do the forks and spoons. And you get what I'm saying? You get what I'm saying? And you want to build up like this. Because when we just tell the kids, do the dishes, it seems hard in their minds and it gets overwhelmed. But when we break it down and we build them up gradually, competence gets built, and we set up the opportunities for us to praise them for their success and for them to reflect on what led them to being successful and the buildup, and they experience good learning. And that will make them more willing to cooperate with other tasks as well. Inshallah bi'idhnillah. Bismillah. So this is now you can do this with obviously you can do this with all different types of things, brothers and sisters. Okay, you can do this with the laundry. You start by just organizing the tops and the bottoms, or the pants and the shirts, or the skirts and the shirts, or whatever. And then like folding is a fine motor skill thing, so that might need its own session to work on, or it might be that you do that with them along in the process. Now, how do you show them the visual? You can print this out easily. I just created this on PowerPoint, just did the pictures while I was doing it, airdropped the pictures to my laptop, put them in PowerPoint. Easy. I don't have a color printer, otherwise I'd print this out in color. You could even laminate it, get like a little ring thing. You get a 3-ring binder. Get a 3-ring, make one of these for every as many tasks as you can around the house. Get a 3-ring binder for household chores. That can be a go-to for the kids when you're teaching them how to perform a task, and they can use it as a reference until they have mastered it. Then when they've mastered one, you take that one out and you build another one up. And this is how you teach kids over time. Think about, if you've ever worked at a place, think about an employee handbook. Okay, sometimes there's like legal stuff with that, but this is part of the way businesses run. All right, they're able to put in these step-by-step processes to have people do tasks independently, and so often they involve visual illustration. Think about IKEA. Why is IKEA so successful? Okay, how did that company get so successful selling people furniture that's not even put together for them? Okay, think about the instructions of putting together something from IKEA. It's completely language neutral. It's all just visual, step-by-step, illustrating from one step to another what you put together. The brother says it's very formulaic. Yes, that's a good thing. That's a good thing. Because, now look, on top of this, it doesn't mean that you can't teach more complicated things. But it's this base level of competence with things that actually complements and sets people up to be able to engage in what is called higher level things. Brother asks, how do you teach problem-solving skills? First, building up their competence in these things, because it's what sets up the structure to get deeper with things. Now, look at what I'm thinking with this. Part of this, let's just look at this, okay? Part of how this sets that up. An organizational integration piece here that this tends to is the fact that you need to put the large plates on bottom and the smaller plates on top. Now, if you just tell the kid to go to the dishes, they might take a small plate out, put the small plate in, and then they take a big plate, and then they realize, like, well, that small plate I just put in, I actually got to take it out now to put the big plate in. And that experiences frustration. Now, the progressives would like to have you think that going through that is some way that they are going to
grapple with and construct for themselves the thing that they need to do. Now, it might be, but they have to have a lot of learner confidence in order to be able to enter into that type of trial and error process. Now, what you can do after you have the kids do this, and after they've done it, you can ask them, why do you think it's important? Why do you think I have you put the large dishes in first, and then the mediums, and then the smaller? Why do you think I have it do that in that order? Oh, well, because it wouldn't make sense if we put the larger ones in, or if we put the larger ones on top of the smaller ones, we wouldn't be able to get the smaller ones. Or the larger ones could crush the smallest one. Like bagging the groceries, you got to put the heavy groceries and that type of thing. Okay, that probably honestly, problem solving skills, brother. Excuse me. I assume it's a brother. There's a companion of the Prophet, at least some, I think actually more than one, named Hanzala, who was a male. So sometimes the name is an or female, but brother Hanzala, the problem solving skills, critical thinking. In all honesty, those types of things, they're kind of buzzwords in education. Okay, they're buzzwords. There's so many buzzwords in education that sound appealing to people, but they're not. But getting to people to actually do those things, it is founded on knowledge, practical, real knowledge that a person is able to recall. Again, you can watch my video with Brother Sajid Lippam that I posted on Tuesday to talk about that. But it talks about how progressive education gets everything twisted by thinking that if you just prompt kids up front to do the critical thinking or the problem solving, then they're going to self-construct it. That is not how that works. Someone actually isolated the clip for me and sent it to me for my talk with Sajid. I talk a little bit about how the failing of STEM schools, and STEM schools are such a popular thing. And oh yeah, we're teaching science, tech, and math and all this type of stuff. And how STEM teaching in these STEM schools is completely based on progressive methods, which gets this stuff mixed around. And the mistake that is made is people look at what professionals do. They look at what professionals do in a tech company or in a science lab. And okay, they're observing things, they're putting things in beakers or whatever. So let's just have the kids get into the lab and let's have them do this stuff. And, and so long as they're like mimicking the professional stuff, somehow they're going to construct the knowledge that they need from that. But that's not what takes place. To do those things competently, they first need to learn about those things in an isolated format. And then they need to learn how the isolated things that they learned, they need to learn explicitly how those things integrate. And this is what starts to build the expertise to be able to practice that professional competence. And something that chess example that I was talking about earlier illustrated is, someone cannot just mimic the professional modes of doing something, the advanced modes of doing something without having a whole lot of background in it built up already. They can't just be thrown into the deep end like that. It's not how learning actually works. Brothers and sisters, okay, Jazakumullah khairan. We are at an hour 22. Inshallah, I wanted to, maybe next week, or I'll try to make a supplemental video where I break down some learning in the masajid that you can see and just analyze it a little bit and how questioning is looking for the kids. Brothers and sisters, remember the process of learning to read and memorize the Quran, okay? The Quran teaches critical thinking skills. It teaches you how to think. It teaches you deep meanings of things. But you know it so much better if you went through the process, which you could call rote, but I actually think that's a mischaracterization of the process. If you went through the process of practicing, of learning Arabic phonetics, the alphabet and the phonetics in an isolated form, learning how to integrate them in an isolated form so that you can read letters, so you can read words, and then learning how to connect words in sentences in an isolated form, and then going from the smaller surahs up to the larger ones. If you've done that whole process, you are so much better set up to understand and learn about the meanings of the Quran and the type of thinking and reasoning and argumentation that the Quran teaches you. You're way better set up for that, as opposed to if you just try to go to that stuff in the first place from the get-go. I'll try to sift through the chats here a little bit. The brother says, eventually you can have one kid teach their... Yes, okay, beautiful. The brother is absolutely right. We're saying eventually you can have one kid teach their sibling, and that will also reinforces them.
Very good. And a whole piece that you did not see with what I showed with my class, part of the process of getting the kids to do that is when we're doing the isolated pieces together, like putting the folders away. You show, me and the teaching partner, we first model for them how to do it. And then we ask, okay, who's a kid who wants to take the place of one of the teachers? And then they do it. And then you have two of the kids do it together. And then the whole class watches just two kids do it together. And then they all try doing it together. That's a very good point, brother. You can have this gradual, they call it gradual release, this gradual release of independence. And two, like, you've gotten to a certain level of mastery once you can teach something to someone else too. So there's a whole buildup that goes up with that as well. Doing a task competently is one thing. Being able to teach someone how to do it competently or teach pieces of it is a high level of mastering in it. Brother says the confidence to also complete the task and see it through to the completion. This will benefit them and development is occurring for sure. Instructor is present 100%. The confidence piece is really important. Okay, the progressive methods, they all rely on this, trying to get them to struggle, quote unquote, through things in order to figure it out themselves. Now, there is points where you want to challenge kids. You want to push them a little bit up their capacity. There is points with that. But you want that to be done when they've been built up to a certain level. If you just try to throw them into that, you overwhelm them and you get all these negative thinking patterns in their minds that take place as a result. The questions that come after are more beneficial than the child trying to figure out themselves. Yes, that is a very good point. Okay. This is how you actually get kids, taking kids through these processes. This is how you actually get them to generate their own questions and generate their own ideas about how doing it. And that's part of the benefit of having the formulaic process. You might take the kid through it and they might say, hey, mom, dad, for me, I think it might actually work easier if I do this, or that way. So now when you've put that foundation in, okay, now they're figuring out some ways to do it themselves and they're having authentic contributions themselves. Brother, I'm so glad you were here for this session, Brother Idris. Also, another thing we can note is the goal for the push in that regard. Yep, and we want the goals to be very explicit up front. Look, now they say don't teach your child of God or gender, just let them figure it out on their own. That's a disaster. Yeah, exactly. I mean, these things are all cross-connected, this whole self-constructing stuff. And of course, things like God and gender, belief and understands that stuff is very intuitive to human nature and child nature. So like that's the thing too. Progressives in their origin, people like John Dewey, who's one of the founding, prime thinkers of progressive theory, they consider themselves naturalists. Like, oh, you're letting what's natural to the child like come out and type that thing. But what the effect of it is actually corrupts their nature is what it actually does. Okay, Jazakumullah, their brother says their hadith of the Prophet literally physically showing the companion some actions or doing something while verbally explaining it as well. Yes, 100%, 100%. And things like even the hadith teaching about the 72 different sects. Like he drew the line in the sand with the branches out. And I believe, I correct me if I'm wrong. Again, I'm not a student of knowledge. I believe he actually had a branch that they hold as a visual demonstration for them with that. It says, wow, I learned so much this panel. Alhamdulillah, may Allah reward you immensely. You likewise. Thank you. Jazakumullah khairan to everyone who's in the chat. Brother said, I asked questions earlier. Please see if you can maybe answer them about fatherlessness, etc. I didn't have a chance to ask last week. Okay, brother, I'm definitely going to do that for you. So if you're still watching at the 128 mark, hold on for a moment. Give me a minute here to drink some water and let my mind reset a little bit before I get into some other questions, because I've been talking for a long time here. See, teaching in person, you can get like verbal reciprocation from people to keep the clip of the class going and give yourself some rests like that. Like that's kind of why I bring the other videos where I'm talking. It gives me some rests within it. But when you're live streaming, trying to keep things going, you, you have to use a lot of breath. Excuse me. Okay, the brother asks, excuse me, sorry. I meant to make the mic. I'm sorry. Don't want you to have to listen to my bodily functions. The brother asks, wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. My dear brother, I have some questions about a particular question I was asked regarding fatherlessness. I don't know if you went over some of the questions, but it'll be khair, inshallah. I did talk a little bit about fatherlessness in part 6. That was one of the questions I addressed
Allahu Akbar. SubhanAllah, Tabarakallah, may Allah guide your project. The brother said one, to consider age and the variable. So 5 years old. Okay, this is when we're talking about the shoe time. So brother Idris, if the question was about fatherlessness, I'm not an expert in that. I'm really not, but I have gleaned some things in teaching kids over the years and seeing kids who unfortunately did not have their father around for whatever reason. And I tried to share in the last one that I did, part 6, my insights regarding that. Okay, so Jazakumullah khairan, everyone. Inshallah, you had as much fun as I did. So remember, break things down into the smallest increments possible. Try to think like a child, or think like really get down to the level of a child's true needs, because we over project with that as much as possible. Success in performing tasks equals motivation. Okay, so when we overburden kids with the tasks and this type of thing, and we don't set them up for success by doing this breakdown, it causes them to experience frustration and to withdraw, which negates motivation. We want them to have motivation and to experience success. And third thing, visual instruction plans when you set them off to do it independently. Visual instruction plans. It's the best thing to start working independently that exists out there. The principles of that, not everything is visual. Okay, like me, I teach reading a lot. There's a way to do assignments with questioning. There's a way to outline writing assignments and stuff like that follow the same principles, though it's not necessarily with pictures, that type of thing. All different types of things along with that. Knowing some of this stuff, inshallah, will help your kids with their academic tasks as well. Inshallah, homeschoolers could benefit from this session. And also, too, if your kid is going to a public school, another school, refer to that school in my training program. And also, be aware of these things. And not every teacher is going to teach this way, because there's a lot of teachers out there who are incompetent. Go to abrahameducation.com/parents. I'll be sending more videos out to the mailing list. Join the mailing list, please. If you want to book a call with me, you can there. And follow me on Instagram, Abraham_education. Jazakumullah khairan. Barakallahu fikum. Anything good that came from this comes from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and his ni'mah upon us. Anything negative or wrong that came from this comes from my own deficiencies and the weakness and deficiencies of myself and my own soul. I bear witness that there's none worthy of worship except Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala alone. I ask Allah for forgiveness and I seek repentance to him alone.